הבהרה. התוכן המשודר מבוסס על עדויות אישיות של מרואיינים אשר נאמרו על דעתם בלבד. אין לראות בתוכן משום המלצה כלשהי לרבות המלצה רפואית ואו נפשית, ואין לראות בו משום עידוד לביצוע פעולות כלשהן.
Iands Israel. החיים שאחרי החיים.
שלום וברוכים הבאים לפודקאסט המצולם של Iands Israel. אנחנו שמחים לארח היום איש מאוד מיוחד.
חוזה הרננדז, שחווה את החוויה שלו לפני 20 שנה. אנחנו פשוט ניתן לו לספר את החוויה שלו, וכמובן שבהמשך אנחנו הולכים להביא עוד ועוד עדויות, גם מהארץ, גם מחול. רק לפני שנתחיל, נציין דבר חשוב, שיש תוכנית, סדרה בנטפליקס, על חוויות סף מוות, וחוזה נמצא בפרק הראשון. אנחנו ממליצים בחום לראות את זה, ואנחנו נרגשים מאוד לארח את חוזה. שלום, חוזה.
Hello, חוזה. שלום.
Thank you for having me. Hello, how are you? I appreciate this very much. Well, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about my story. I was an electrical engineer way back, and I was running some electrical lines in a bucket truck. And here in the United States, it was Wednesday, and the next day was going to be Thanksgiving. So we have a 4-day weekend, so it was getting late, and we were thinking, how will we get this finished so we could get home? So we decided that I was going to stay up on the bucket, and the driver was just going to manage around. And then most people will say, well, did you get electrocuted or anything? No, I didn't get electrocuted. The driver was trying to keep me safe, so he just bumped into a tree. I hit the bucket. I broke all the ribs on my right side, and that was the beginning of my journey. I went into the emergency room, and they gave me a medication. And it was a painkiller, and it had some kind of anti-inflammatory in it. And it turns out I was allergic to the anti-inflammatory part of it. And so my lungs began to shut down. And it was very difficult to breathe. So I told them, it's very hard to breathe. And they said, no, don't worry about it. You're all taped up. You're not going to be able to take a deep breath. So that's normal. So I went home. I kept taking this medication, and after a while, it got to a point where I couldn't breathe at all. So it was in 2000. And they were going to have the big Y2K thing, and everybody was talking about what was going to happen with that, and it was all this. I managed to get through that new year. Now, if you could imagine, this happened in the end of November, and I'm slowly just getting worse. And I got up one day, actually it was January 5th, today. My wife at the time then took me to the hospital with my son. It was late. So I told them, just go home. I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about anything. And they went home. The nurse came and she gave me the little button, and she said, have difficulty or anything gets worse, just push this button. And I'm a guy, so I'm thinking, I'm not going to worry about pushing a button or anything like that. So anyway, she left the room. I waited about 45 minutes. And in those 45 minutes, all I was thinking about is I really should push this button, because I really don't feel good. And I kept thinking, no, it's going to be fine. You never think that you're dying or that you're in really bad shape. So I waited 45 minutes. I finally pushed the button. The nurse comes to the door. It took about a minute for her to get there, but that was the longest minute of my life. And when she opened the door, she just looked at me. She just punched the cold blue. And it didn't dawn on me that I was in dire, that I was in a bad situation. I didn't understand why she hit the cold blue, but the next thing I know, there's a bunch of people running in the room, right? You got a crash team. So respiratory, everybody's coming in there. And I'm going to share the experience of my dying, because it was very interesting, because I went through a bunch of different emotions. So if you can imagine, the first emotion that I felt was shame. And I'm going to explain to you why I felt ashamed, because I had the sheet, and I'm trying to hold this sheet. and they came in there and they were stripping me. They just pulled that off me, and I felt ashamed because I couldn't hold on. And the next thing I know, they lifted me up, they're sticking a board under me, and then they're laying me down. And I really couldn't breathe at all. So if you could imagine when you take a deep breath and you go, you let that go. Now imagine you can't let it go. So not only can you take air, you can't let go of what you have. So I was really struggling with that, and I still didn't think that I was in a desperate situation. So I started thinking at that point about my family. And I said, well, what if this is a little more serious than I think? What if something happens to me? What's going to happen to them? You know, and I got this knot in my chest. And it was emotionally, it was the most intense moment that I ever experienced as a human, emotionally, because I couldn't fathom not being able to see them again. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning now. And I knew that if something was going to happen to me, that's not going to be able to call them and that they would come there. So I felt incredibly alone. And I felt like I was falling and falling emotionally, spiritually. I felt like I was just free falling. And I felt like I never had fallen that low in my life. And then I started thinking, I don't believe in God. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in spirit. I was very science-minded. So I believed in math and science. And I'm thinking, if something happens to me, I'm going to get shut off like a light bulb. And I'm just going to disappear. And that was a very frightful thought. It was really, really scary. So what happened was I felt so fearful that I wanted somebody to hold my hand. Now, you can't speak. I couldn't breathe, so I can't speak. I can't do anything. And I could have held somebody's hand. There were so many people around me. And then I started thinking about my father. And my father was a very man's man. He was really macho, tough guy. And I grew up that way. He taught me how to be like that, you know. So we didn't cry. We didn't show emotion. And he was half First Nation. So it was an interesting, my father's half First Nation. So it was pretty interesting for me because he wouldn't hug. We wouldn't say we love each other. It was a really difficult relationship. And my dad used to drink a lot. And he was always out chasing women and doing all kinds of stuff. And I was always defending my mother. And I couldn't understand why she was still with him. I said, why? He's doing all these things. Why? But anyway, that was for her. So I was always defending her. So me and my dad were always crashing. And I started thinking about him, and I said, if I ask for somebody to hold my hand, or if I take somebody's hand in his grave, and I actually started thinking, I can't let anybody know I'm afraid. I can't show any fear. And my body, if you imagine you can't breathe, and then I'm going, I'm not going to show any fear. I can't show fear. And I didn't. The next thing I started thinking about was, okay, what if God is real? What if he's real? And then I started thinking, well, let me reach out. And I said, God, if you're real, this is a good time for you to kind of intervene. You know, save me. And if you save me, I'm going to change. I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to be completely different from what I am. And then I waited for what felt like an hour. It was only 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most.
Wow.
And nothing happened. And then I started thinking, well, I knew there was no God. I knew this wasn't real. What am I doing? I'm crazy. And at that point, because I couldn't breathe and I wasn't getting any oxygen, my heart started to get very irregular. And it was racing, and I could feel it like pop, 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 boom. It wasn't no consistency. It was like a horse galloping. And I remember looking at the wall and seeing the grain on the wall so clearly, like I was so far from the wall, but I could see it like I was looking at it under a microscope. And I could hear the IV drip, splashing like it was hitting a tin roof. Splash, splash, splash. And it was interesting because I'm asking myself, wow, what is going on? And I remember looking at the door in the room that was open, and it was very bright. And I saw a shadow. And it was at that point that I started thinking, you know, life has been very hard. And I've tried everything I could, and I did everything I could. And I kept saying, I'm not quitting, I'm not giving up, but I understand that there's nothing I could do to stop this from happening. So I said to myself, maybe it's okay to die. And, you know, I've lived a pretty rough life. I grew up in the South Bronx. It was pretty difficult. I had a lot of challenges. I was lucky to get out, but maybe it's okay to die now. And the minute I thought that, the shadow that was by the door moved around everybody. And to me, it was a female energy. It was a feminine presence. And she reached out and she touched me. When she touched me, I felt completely at peace, total calm. I felt this amazing sense of love, and it's hard to describe it. And I felt a breeze, and I got long hair, so I'm thinking, oh, my hair must be blowing in this breeze, you know. I felt so happy. And the thing about it was that I could breathe. I was okay. And I felt this wind just blowing, and then lifting me. And the next thing I know, I was in the corner of the room, and I was watching the scratch team trying to save my life, doing CPR. And I looked at myself, and these are the changing moments in your life. This is what really changed in me. I looked at myself, and I said, that's me, and I'm dead. But if that's me, then who am I? That question is still with me. Because everything that I needed to be there, standing and looking and thinking, was dead in my body. And I was thinking that my eyes are dead, my brain is dead. How could I be doing this? And then I heard a voice on my left side. And she said to me, imagine your body is a car. And this car has like 5 million miles on it, and we can't fix it anymore. So you need to say goodbye to your body. And I thought, my God, I just said it was okay to die, and that was really hard. And now it's asking me to say goodbye to my body. But I'm going to tell you the most beautiful thing happened. When I looked at my body, for the first time in my life, I loved it. I thought of my body as something that had been so perfect. And when I was alive, I was never happy. But there was always something wrong. Oh, look at this, look at that, you're this, you're that. How do other people see me? I was so worried about all that stuff. And I looked at my body and I felt love for my body for the first time. And I realized that this body gave itself up for me. And here I am continuing. Now my body's dead. It's going to go back to the earth. And I felt so much gratitude and so much happiness. And then I started having these little memories. And when I was having these memories, you think that you're going to think about those galvanizing moments in your life. You know, when something dramatic really happens in your life, those are the moments you're going to remember. And that's not what I remember at all. I remember my brother's hand when I was 2 and he was 4. When I was 4 and he was 2. I remember taking a deep breath. I remember a hug, a kiss. I remember the sunrise. I remember the birds. I remember all these beautiful things. And in that moment, I realized that I was living my life in a dream. Because I was worried about success. I was worried about material things. And everything that I had in my life that was free, that was the majority of my life, because this is what we experience in life every minute of every day, taking a breath, seeing things and experience things, and a smile here, little things like that. I had never taken the time to appreciate any of it. That wasn't important. Everything else was important. I have to get to work on time. I got to do this. I got this to do. And I realized that I had really missed my life. I had been alive all that time and I had really missed life. And I just felt so much love for all the opportunities that I had. And then the voice says to me, okay, now we got to go. We got to keep going. And we just started walking together. And I saw this big hole in the ground. It was like a big black hole. And we walked right onto it and I fell in it. And I'm falling and falling and I feel like something's tearing me apart. And I get to the bottom, I land, and she says, no, we got to keep going. And I kept going and there was another big hole and I walked in that and I fell again. And same thing, I felt this tearing. When I got to the bottom, she explained to me that what was being torn off from me and was painful were all the bad memories from my life, all the painful events, all those things that hurt me. So how I felt about myself, how I thought other people perceived me, how I had envy sometimes, how I was jealous of this, how, you know, I was trying to compete with all these people for all these things and I didn't need to. So I had left all that behind. Then I find myself, if you could imagine this, imagine being inside a ball. And you're right in the middle of this ball and all around is color. And this color was moving and changing and it was talking to me. And I could hear like a million voices talking to me at one time, one shh. So I describe it as chatter. And that sense of peace and love and calm was so galvanizing. And what was interesting was that I realized that it was living. The color was as alive as I was. But it was also accepting. It accepted me. And I felt so humble and so like, it's hard to describe because the feeling was of perfection. And I felt the color was either moving to me or I was moving towards the color. And then I kind of went into the color and I became the color. And I felt the most beautiful sense of love and peace and how valuable I really was. And in life, I never thought that. And I keep saying in life, but the reality is I felt more alive here than when I was alive in my body. And I finally kept moving through the color until I came out on the other side. And when I came out on the other side, it was the most beautiful landscape. It was like the most amazing forest. And I could see these mountains a little further down and I could see the dark shadows that the clouds made, and it was so contrasting and beautiful. And I saw all these animals just running around, and I said, wow, what an amazing place this is. And I heard the voice, and I realized that I thought about my kids at that moment. And I heard the voice, I said, what's going to happen to my children? And the voice said to me, do not worry, you can see them from here, don't worry. And I said, wow, that made so much sense. Then I just kept on moving on my journey, so I was flying. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm flying. And the voice said to me, that's normal here. And you accept everything. Like, then I started to feel the air around me, but the air was alive. The trees were alive, and I could become the air. And if I got near a tree, I could become a leaf, or I could become the tree. And I felt the tree drinking from the earth, and how amazing that was. And the rocks were living, and I could feel that rock, and everything had a heart. Everything was alive. The birds, you become a bird for a second. It was the most amazing experience, because we talk about being one. But I experienced being one with a lot of things while I was there. And I kept flying and moving and in awe. And now you're thinking, I thought I was alive when I was in my body, but I didn't know what being alive was till now. Now I'm really alive. And I'm going over this mountain, and if you imagine the mountain, it has snow on the top, and I'm getting higher and higher. I go over this mountain, and when I look, there's a beautiful cove on my left, beautiful beach. And then if I look towards my right, I can see the sun. And the sun, I can't tell if it was rising or setting. But when I looked at it, it's like I was looking through a telescope, and I could see the flares just coming off her. And she was so beautiful, and that warm air was just coming from her. And even there, I thought, well, maybe that warm air was helping me to fly. Then I looked back to my left, and I looked at the beach, and there was a man in the beach. He was in the water up to his knees, and on his left hand and right hand, he was holding 6 kids. So they were like in a chain, each holding hands. And on his left hand, he was holding one. And I started to get closer and closer to him, because I said, let me find out who this is. Let me find out what this is. And when I got about 10 or 15 feet away from him, he turned around. And when he turned around, that was my father. I died 5 years before me. And I looked at my dad, and I started thinking, what an amazing moment this is going to be, because I'm going to be able to tell my father what I couldn't tell him when I was alive. I was going to tell him, I love you, Dad. And I care about you, and things like that. We never did that. I never remember saying to my dad, I care about you, I love you. I don't remember him saying it to me. So I never thought that my father cared about me. I never thought he loved me. So I'm standing here like saying, wow, this is going to be the most incredible moment that I'm going to be able now to do this. And when I looked at my dad and he looked at me, I could hear him in my head. I wasn't speaking, but I was, because I know he was hearing me in his head. And he looked at me, and then I came right next to him. And I hugged my father for the first time that I could remember. When I held him, I became him. And I could feel everything that he felt, everything that he thought. And I realized how he had struggled. And I also realized that he did love me, and that he cared about me, and that he was proud of me, and all these things. And I let go. And I realized that I had, in a way, forgiven him. And he had forgiven me. But I think the most important lesson that I got from that was not that we forgave each other, but that I was able to forgive myself. Because I had this guilt, I had all these issues that I was struggling with. Because when my father died, I was the one that had to sign off and disconnect him from life support. So I felt kind of guilty. I know he would never have survived, but when you disconnect somebody from life support, you feel you contributed to their death. So for 5 years, I wrestled with that and never being able to say goodbye, never being able to say, I love you. And now, in my own death, I experienced the opportunity to make peace with that and forgive myself. And all those years that I had punished myself, I was able to let it go. So my dad looked at me at that point and he said, you know, Jose, you can't stay, you have to go back. And I looked at my father and I remember just shaking my head and saying, no, I like it here, I don't want to go back. And I always find that very interesting because when I was dying, I was very fearful and I didn't want to die. Now I had died and I didn't want to come back. So we kept with that exchange and he said, no, you got to go back. I said, no, I'm not going back. Then I felt a pressure in my chest and something pulling me from my back. And the next thing I know, I opened my eyes and there was a lady doctor doing CPR. And when I opened my eyes, she kind of went back. Then I went back to my father again. And he looked at me and we're having the same thing. Well, you got to go back. And then I said, no. Then he looked at me and said, well, I'm going to do a deal. Let's make a deal. My father was always making deals. So he looked at me and said, let's make a deal. And I said, okay, what's the deal? And he said, if you go back, I promise, when your time comes, I'll go get you. And I looked at him and I said, man, what an amazing deal. That sounds like a good deal. And I said, okay. The instant I thought that, okay, felt that pressure again, I was being pulled, wound up back in my body. And I was in pain, I was in agony, I had a tube breathing for me. And I was wondering, how bad must I have been that I got kicked out of heaven? And I'm back now in agony and pain and struggling in my body. And then I started thinking, was this real? Was this real? And I started thinking, no, maybe it was the drugs, maybe it was all this stuff. And I started to get very anxious. And now, this woman comes to the door. And she looked at me, and I looked at her. I was really beginning to panic, and the heart alarm was going off. So when your heart reaches like 146, the alarm goes off. And she looked at me and she asked me something very strange. Now, my mother was Catholic, but I haven't been in a church in over 30 years. Now imagine. And she asked me if I wanted to take communion. And I looked at her, I got this tube in my mouth. Like, for some reason I nodded yes. She came in and she went like that to me. And she had oil on her palm and she rubbed it. And she touched me right here. And when she touched me, it was like I was dead again. I just felt that peace and calm and that love, it just took over. And I got really calm. She looked at me and I hear her saying, I couldn't understand what she was saying. It wasn't in English. And she said, I'm going to leave this over here on this table for you. And she left. When I got out of the hospital, now imagine my prognosis is you're not going to leave here alive. take care of your affairs. I'm in the hospital for 3 months, and I'm in the critical care unit for 6 weeks. And every day that they hit, every time they hit a cold blue, I'm getting really anxious because I'm saying that's going to be me again. And even though I had that experience, I didn't believe it. Because my logical brain took over my science mind, and I couldn't believe it. And anyway, every time that they hit the cold blue, in my mind, I would go to that ball of color, and I would stay in there. And I felt safe. I felt peace and calm there, and loved. And then with time, I started to get better, and I wasn't supposed to. So if you could imagine, 12 weeks later, they're going to send me home. And they're telling me, you know, Jose, you're only going to live about a year to 18 months. But if we remove half of each lung, you may be able to survive for 3 years. And I was like, I'm in the hospital for 3 months. I lost about 30 pounds. I was like a stick. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be in here anymore. I'm not going to do that. I'll take my chances. And I left. And I had also had the experience of having an opportunity to speak with my cardiologist. And all I said to him one day was, you know, I think I went somewhere. That's what I said. I think I went somewhere. And he looked at me and said, oh, no, forget it. You understand that your brain is still alive for 2 minutes after your heart stops, and you had all these drugs and all these things, and it was a hallucination. And I started to think, well, maybe he's right. Maybe it was a hallucination. But anyway, I left there, and then dying is very traumatic. It leaves its imprint in you, and you can never let it go. It stays with you forever. I think about my death every day, 10 times a day. I can't, something always reminds me of it. And I'm at home trying to improve. I got the thought, let me find this woman that came in the middle of the night, because she kind of helped me. She saved my life. I went to every church, every synagogue. I went everywhere. I went to try to find a person that could have been there in the middle of the night that was trying to help people. And I couldn't find her. And I remember I went to the last place that I could go was a church. And I said, this lady was there. She had this beautiful gray and white hair. She was a perfect grandmother from a movie. She was just that. No, that's not her. Anyway, I met the woman that comes out, and then that person said to me, Jose, you do realize that at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody from anywhere going to be in a hospital trying to help people transition. And it dawned on me that maybe that person wasn't real. Yes. And maybe she was an angel. And I started to believe now. Imagine I went into a hospital not believing in any God, in any afterlife, in anything. Now I believe in this spirit that's so beautiful. And now I'm even believing, I'm thinking angels are real. Anyway, I was really struggling with this experience, and I didn't know if it was real still. So I went to see a psychologist. And if you can visualize a guy walking around with oxygen everywhere and barely being able to walk, that was me. And I went to see a psychologist, and I saw her for a few months, and I couldn't talk to her. So I would go in that room and sit there quietly, and she would ask about simple things, the weather. I could answer that, but when she would say, why are you here? I could never speak to that. Anyway, I wound up going to a different psychologist, and then going to a different psychologist. Now, if You have to understand, when you leave the hospital, I was addicted to a lot of medications. So I had to get myself off of all these medications because they gave you all these medications to keep your heart rate down and things like that, or keep you calm. It took me 2 years to get over all that. And I needed the psychologist to help me with that. But it wasn't until I saw my third psychologist that I was able to sit on the sofa in her room. And she was so kind. She sat next to me and she took my hand. She took my hand, and I thought, when I was dying, I was afraid to ask somebody to hold my hand because I thought I was being brave. And I realized what a coward I had been and how important that was. When she held my hand and I felt the warmth of her hand and that touch, it gave me permission to tell my story.
Beautiful.
So for the first time, I was able to tell her, why am I here? Well, I'm here because I died and I went somewhere. And I don't know if that was real. Am I crazy? Because even my family thought I was not well in my head. Because here's a man that never talked about spirit or anything. Now I'm talking about spirit, talking about these different things, and they're saying, something happened to you, you're not the same guy. So my ex-wife used to say to me, she used to call me Joe. Where's the old Joe? I don't know who you are. I didn't marry you. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a better version. I'm more spiritual. You know, I'm into all these things that I didn't believe before. But anyway, she wanted the guy that was very materialistic, that was always trying to get things and trying to make all this money. And I wasn't that person anymore. That man died in that hospital bed. You don't come back who you were. When you come back, you're a different person. And I explain it to myself, and I say, if I imagine an ocean, and I take one drop of water and I drop that water in, and that was me, and it gets mixed with this ocean, I can never pull that drop of water out, the same exact drop that went in, out. It'll always be mixed with something else. And I think we get mixed with spirit. We get mixed with creation, with creator, whatever you want to call it, God. And I came back and nobody embraced me. Even my children would say to me, where's the old Joe? And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And it made it harder to accept what happened. So it made it easy for me to think I was crazy. So I'm going to these psychiatrists and I'm saying, who's going to give me the magic pill that's going to make me normal? That's going to make me go back? And I was really blessed because none of them thought I needed to be medicated. I finally find a psychologist, this is the 5th one, that worked with Iands. And she said to me, Jose, don't worry. You're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. This is normal. I had never heard of an NDE. I didn't know about none of this stuff. I thought I was the only one in the world that was going through this, and I felt so separate from everybody. I felt like I didn't belong here anymore. And I felt like I was in a bubble, and everybody was here. And even if I was there, I wasn't there because they were so like distant from me. And, you know, anyway, she helped me to embrace the fact that this was real. And she taught me something very important. She said, you know, Jose, you have to have one foot in the world of spirit and you got to keep one foot here. And she explained it very simply to me. She said, if you get into the world of spirit too much, everybody's going to think you're crazy and they're going to medicate you. But if you get back into this physical world too much, you're going to lose spirit. So you have to find a balance. And it was 4 years before I finally said, you know what? I did meet my father. I was in those colors. I did feel that tree. I did feel that bird. I did feel that incredible sense of love and peace and calm. And it was at this point that I started thinking, I had this desire and this need to paint. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I've never painted in my life. I have no idea how to paint. But it was such a strong, overwhelming feeling. And I started thinking, well, how could I do this? But I didn't want to paint. I wanted to make paint that was alive. I wanted to reproduce what I saw. And I started to paint, and then I started to import everything into a computer, and I created a three-dimensional plane. And I started painting in layers, a lot of layers. So I would paint and then paint over it and paint over it and paint over it. And I started thinking that that was like how we are when we're alive. So if I'm 10, I'm like this. But when I'm 15, all these things happen in my life, and I begin to get, it's like putting coats on and putting another coat on and putting another coat on, and I'm beginning to change. And then when you're 25, you're a lot different than you were 20 or 15. And you think you know what you want. Well, I want to be an engineer. That's going to make me happy. And then you wind up in a cubicle and you wind up doing all this stuff, and you figure, well, I really don't like this. Anyway, I started to paint. And when I was in the color, I was given like a recipe. Here's the blueprint of how you got to paint this. And I needed to add elements of fire and air and earth and everything, right? The 4 forces, the 4 elements. It had to speak to the 4 directions. It had to speak to 7 directions, up, down, and inside. And I started to paint, and I learned that if I added a light to it, they would begin to move. I'll send you some of these things so you could have a reference to it. And then I began to call it living color. And what was interesting was that I started to paint with a black canvas. And people say, why a black canvas? And I said, the secret to life is that for us, we're afraid of the dark. We think black is negative. But I learned that in this black, in this space that we think is empty, is creation, is everything that we need for life. So I look at space at night, and I look at the black space, and I say to myself, in that black space were all the ingredients to give birth to all these stars, to all these planets, to Mother Earth, to all these animals, to us. So we came, in my mind, from that, what I call creation. So the cradle of creation to me is in that space that we say is empty. That's where God lives. That's where Creator lives. That's where everything that we need for life is. So to create a painting, I needed to add that ingredient. Because the idea is when I look at this painting, I see myself. And these colors are talking to me. Now, I truly believe to this day that that's what saved my life, the colors, going there. And it makes me understand how everything is connected in one. But when you look at the painting, the idea is that you look at yourself, and then I could see all my ancestors, all my family, that tree of where I came from. And the funny thing is that it reaches a point, if you go back far enough, where I am you and you are me. And there's no longer any separation between any of us, because we go back to the beginning. In the beginning, we came from the same oneness. When I get in this body, I feel this tremendous sense of separation. I feel I'm separate from everything. In my heart, I know that I'm not. I know that everybody is connected to me, everything. And in my dad's culture, we have this saying where we say, all my relations. And it speaks very specifically to us being one. But it also speaks to, for example, if I walk by and you're in a bus and I go in the bus and we sit there together and we're there for 5 minutes and I see you and you see me, and then I walk away and I never see you again. But in that moment in my life, you will always exist. You will always be a part of my life. I can't disconnect from that. And that sense of an awareness of being one is where we really diverge as humanity. I believe I'm in this body and I'm separate from everything else, and I'm all this. I'm a father, I'm an engineer, I'm all these things, but I realize that all those things don't matter. What matters is that I have the capacity to love and to give this love and to leave it here. So if you look at it, when I paint, I leave my painting here forever. I can't take it with me. You guys are gonna create a video right now and you're gonna tell the story. That story is gonna stay in this place forever somewhere. We can't take it back. But what we could take with us are the memories that we create. So the advice that I give everybody is make happy memories. Make good memories in life. Take the time to see these little things that are so important in your world, the people around you, your friends, the things you love, even if it's a cup like this. This is my favorite cup. And I have coffee in this cup every day, and it's like a part of my life. It's important to me.
Wow.
You know, not the cup, but the memories of how it makes me feel when I drink something warm and how it makes me feel good. Those are the things I ask people to remember and take. Because anything that's traumatic, that creates anxiety, that creates pain, I can't take that with me. So why create it? Why do we get all like worried about a million things and we get frustrated and we create all this battles, we fight? For what? I can't take that with me. I can only take the love.
I feel that you're saying a lot of important things like about your experience after your NDE, about processing this experience, which is huge. There is no words, and especially if you wasn't aware to this love knowledge before. And I think that a lot of people, including me, for years, they have hard time to talk about it, and you express the process of that you had inside of you in such a beautiful way. So thank you for that, and I hope it will be helpful for people that dealing with that to know that all the, even being skeptic, for me made me feel that, okay, if I'm skeptic about the most real thing that I ever experienced, so maybe it's not real, but it's more real than real. And you talked about the experience meeting your dad, and there is a lot of people that feel that it's hard for them to forgive. How can we, because we don't want to get there and then say, aha, the aha moment. We want here to be without this drama, to be forgiving. What's your advice to people that feel very hard to forgive others and still stuck in this drama?
My advice is very simple. In my experience, I learned a couple of things that really changed my life and made it easy for me to live. I'm not searching anymore. I don't need to find things. I am content. I am happy. what allows me to be happy was, first of all, I learned that I needed to love myself. If I could love myself, then I could love others. We try to fill the emptiness in ourselves by loving others or trying to do this for somebody else. And we realize, or we don't realize, that we need to fill ourselves with that sense before we could share it and give it. And then we're afraid to give love because we're afraid of being hurt. We're afraid that somebody's going to hurt us or take advantage or abuse us. And, you know, it could be, but it doesn't matter to me anymore. I know I need to give this. We're here to give. We're here to serve. Everything we do for others or we do it for ourselves. We're serving something. And being able to forgive is the same mindset. If I wasn't able to forgive myself when I met my dad, I may not be able to forgive others. And when you're able to forgive others and forgive yourself, what happens is you have the capacity to actually feel good. The minute I forgive someone, I feel better.
Beautiful.
I feel better. And the reason I feel better is because now I don't have that guilt. I don't have that anger. I don't have that. We need to kind of let these things go. You know, when you died, I'm sure you're going to understand what I'm saying. A lot of people think we leave our body. I believe I fold into myself.
Go in.
And ultimately, God, the Creator, lives right here in my heart only, not in my mind. My mind is subject to everything that exists in this world. My heart is pure. And when I die, I keep folding and getting closer to my heart energy, And it is the reason I believe that we feel this immense sense of love, this peace, this calm, because that's the only thing that lives in your heart. Anger, envy, fear, all that exists in my mind.
Your head, yeah, yeah.
I make it, I create it. And you know, an example is sometimes we're really worried about something. And we're worried about the moment. And then when the moment gets here, nothing happens. But we had all that anxiety for all that time to get there. Kind of like when I was dying, all that fear. And then when I got there, wow, it was that wow moment. And I think that's how we are as human beings. We look, if you want to be peaceful, you have to become peace. If you want people to love you, you have to give love. You have to become love. If you want whatever you want, you have to be able to become it and give it. It's kind of like becoming one. When you die, you become one. It's hard to explain that. But if you become one with all these things that you feel or that you want, then you're able to give it. And once I can give love, love can come to me, you know. And we have to understand that we need to separate the physicality of love from the emotion of love, you know. And you could appease one, but it doesn't appease the other. You have to be able to do both. And I think that's what creates balance. It's about balance. I believe I'm an aspect of the Creator. So I believe in creation as a different thing. That creation to me is one, a unifying force that brings everything together and is conscious of everything at the same time. I don't believe as Creator as a being, because I believe I am part of that. I create. We think about creation when we make babies. We think about creation when we build something. We think about creation like that. But I'm creating every moment, every second of my life. And we all have that choice at every second to pivot and change our lives. So when we talk about crossroads, every second that I live, I'm at that crossroad. I always have an opportunity to change.
Yes.
I don't look at crossroads as being dramatic moments either, like, oh, when you graduate from college, or when you get married, or when this happens, that's a crossroad. Every second that I'm alive, I have a chance and a choice that I make. I could continue to be the same, or I could change. So if I make a change today, I may not see that change for a few years, but I have to make that change. So if we change, if we decide we want to change our lives and live our lives better, make our lives happier, make our lives more filled with love, I have to make that decision to do that. And once it's made, then I have to put the energy in it that it requires to make it happen. It doesn't happen by itself. It's not magical that way. What's magical is that we make it happen. We have the magic in us to make that real. And I think when we begin to understand that we have that power, we could change our lives. Imagine if everybody was thinking about love right now. Imagine how this world would be if I said to you, you know what? I have this and I know you need it. Let me give it to you. Because I'm not using it. Instead of saying, if I give this to you, you're going to be able to do this and you might get better than me.
So what do you think is the difference between us and God? Because I am not God, but God is inside of me. But it's not that I am God. I can't right now change that the sun will be in different hours. Not that I want to, but we cannot. But we are participating with the creation, with God. So what's the difference between us and God?
None. God moves through us. Mm-hmm. If God is in me, if God gives me the capacity to love, to do all these things, then God empowers us. Now we need to take that power that God gives to us, that we're born with, and do the best we can with it.
You said that today you feel less conflicts in your life after your NDE. And being outside the body is feeling the oneness. So why the spiritual reality and this reality feels that they're different?
It feels different because I'm in my body and I feel I'm separate from everything. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in a sweat. You go into the space and it's pitch black. And there could be 20 people there. But we can't see anything. So if I go like this, I can't see my hand. But consciously, I'm aware that there are 20 people there. But what I learned was that when I'm there, I realize how we're all the same. Doesn't matter if this guy's taller than me, if this guy's shorter than me. None of that matters anymore because I can only feel the presence of their consciousness. And it reminds me of how everything is one. And I'm going to share that story to you very easily. I'm allergic to bees. One day I got stung by a bee. And I'm out of sweat. It's a spiritual event. And one of the elders, and I said to the elder, I got stung by a bee and I don't have my EpiPen. I got to get out of here and go to the hospital because I'm not going to be able to breathe. And he looked at me and he said, no, just calm down, take a deep breath. And I said, no, I can't, you don't understand. So my thigh was swelling up. And I said, I got to get to the hospital. But then I started thinking, I'm not going to make it in time. I already had my near-death experience. So I said, look how beautiful the sky is. Look at these trees. There's a river right next to me. It's beautiful, the sound. This is as good a place as any to die. I was very peaceful with that. Then he looked at me and he grabbed these 4 leaves from a bush. And they were all filled with spider web and all this stuff. And he looked at me and he said, take this and chew it. And I'm looking at him like, you're crazy. I'm already having an allergic reaction. So He said, just chew it. When you chew it, it's going to get sticky. When it gets sticky, put it on where the bee stung you. And I said, well, I got nothing to lose. I chewed it. It got sticky. I put it on there. Instantly, my thigh felt better. In a minute, the swelling was gone. We went in the sweat, and we came out. And he looked at me, and he said, what did you learn from this? And I said, I'm not getting it. What? And he said, did you understand that that bee made a pact to sting you and that it would lose its life right here when it stung you? And that bush knew that that bee was going to sting you right here. And it needed to grow there. So I needed to be here so I could go grab those 4 leaves and I could give it to you so you could chew it. Do you understand how everything is one? And I thought, oh my gosh, I thought oneness was only in the other side. He demonstrated to me how that is still true here. If everything is conscious, then everything has an awareness and an understanding. So that's the answer to your question about the difference between the two places. And the answer is there is no difference. The only difference is in my mind. The other side is present every moment, every second, always. Do I see it? No, because I'm in this body and I see what's the physical world around me. But I can understand it in my heart. And if I could understand that, it gives me great peace because I know everything is perfect. Even when we struggle, even when things are bad, we all suffer loss. We all feel cheated sometimes. We all feel like, man, life is so rough and difficult. Why do I even want to be here sometimes? We all have these thoughts. But I learned that those are thoughts that happen here. Those are thoughts. If I can embrace and understand that everything is one, no matter how I look at it, no matter how I feel, and I can go back to that, then that gives me enough peace to get through it. So I had a very rough childhood, very difficult life. I saw a lot of death. I saw a lot of things that I think children should never see. Do I regret it? In a way, yes, consciously. In my heart, I know it was essential for me. I know Creator, God, would not allow me to experience this unless it was something that I needed to experience. And in those moments, there were still good moments. So if I look at only the bad, then I'm only focusing on the bad. But in that time, there's still a lot of goodness happening. That's what dying showed me, that there's so many beautiful moments that we never really think about. They don't have any value because we're too busy trying to do something else, trying to get people to see me, trying to get people to hear me, trying, not be invisible, trying to do something that's really important. You know what I do that's important? I'm here. And people love me and I love them. That's important. The idea is to get people to understand that we're a lot more than whatever we think we are, and we're a lot more valuable, and what we say is important, and what we do is important. And, we got to stop thinking about ourselves like this and think ourselves like this. Because a lot of the difficulty in our world is we make it, And, so I think it's important. The art to me, and I hope people can go to my website. It's innerimmersion.org and Jose Hernandez fineart.com. It speaks to being free. Now we talk about freedom. We think about freedom, and we think about freedom from oppression. We think about other people dominating us and ruling us and making us do things we don't want. And that's an aspect of being free. But to be really free, I need to live from here. If I'm living from here, I'm always a prisoner of something. Here, it's endless possibility. Endless possibility. Anything is possible. Here, we think of everything as possible. We could understand infinite concepts. We could understand all these things. We could understand quantum physics. We could do all these things. But it's limited. It's limited. Everything responds because of something else here. And here, everything responds because it has to respond. Because it responds. It makes my life very simple thinking that way. And when you have that experience as you've had, you understand how profound being able to embrace that is. It's very hard to integrate. It takes a lot of years for us to say, maybe I'm not crazy. A lot of people think I am. A lot of people that know me don't understand me anymore. And that's okay. I understand that that's their role, that's what they have to do, that's what they need to do. But I also understand that my role, like your role, is to get this information out,
What is the truth for you after your experience? And what do you think is the universal truth?
Well, I think the truth for me is that everything is simple. You know, I used to think of life very complex. I was very complex. You know, when you're an engineer, you think about solutions. You have to find a solution. That's what an engineer does. They find solutions. When I died, I found the solution to life. And the solution to life is very simple. If I feel grateful for everything that's in front of me, even if I may not like it, even if I feel threatened by it, even if I feel whatever, if I feel grateful, I'm honoring one thing, I'm honoring my life. And I'm honoring everything around me. And if I could honor things, first of all, honor myself and allow myself to feel and to be open. Then I give myself every opportunity that Creator gave me, that God gave me. God planted this seed inside of us.
In the minute you're inside the body, you have two of you. And there is me that wants to achieve things like that. And there is the pure essence, God inside of me, that just want to be the love that God is. So there is a conflict in any person. And in Hebrew, we say the other world, it means העולם הבא. And haba, it means the coming world. So it's not separated from this world. Can you give few advices to people that want to start living from the heart? Because we have our, past and walls that we put around us. So how can we help people to get connected much more to the heart and to act, do things from the heart, and then try to feel the other world in this world?
That requires a little work. It requires work. It requires a desire to want to be there. And that means that we have to make a conscious decision to arrive there. The plan starts with thinking about, how do I feel about me? How do I feel about how I look? How do I think other people see me? And then that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because I remember being worried about how other people thought about me. What did they see? And I projected into them my own fears and my own worries and my own what I thought were inadequacies in me. And I would think that they thought that, and they saw me that way. And what we have to begin to learn is to separate what we think and stop putting it in other people's head, because more often than not, that's not there. It's your own fear. It's fear of being rejected. It's fear of all these things, right? It's fear of not being good enough. It's fear of, you know, imagine my dad when he worked so hard and he didn't have enough money so that we could all eat, and we had to go 1 or 2 days without eating. There were 8 of us, 10 of us, 8 children. And imagine how he felt, how inadequate he felt, how he wasn't good enough. Was he a man even if he can't feed his family? You know, when you satisfy yourself, when you begin to feel good about who you are, and feeling good about who you are means you're okay with whatever it is you do. Maybe you had an opportunity to go to college and you didn't, and now you're stuck waiting tables. But there's a grace in that. There's still a beauty to it. There's still something that you bring to it. You could have a smile. You could be projecting this good energy, you know, and life can change for you. My advice to people is very simple. Look, think about that last moment when you're going to close your eyes and leave this world. We never do. I didn't till I died. Think about that moment, and if anything could have been done different, what would you do different? And do it now. Don't wait till that last moment where you regret it. And you say, oh, I'll never have a chance to do this, so I never did that. Do it now.
If I told that to you before your NDE, you would tell me, I want to be an engineer, and that's not your essence. So if someone is with a false identity, the things that he wants, it will be different than the soul wishes.
Right, but what you have to do is understand what you want. So I do a practice. I'll give you an example. I do a practice. And I'll say to you, I want you to write down the 20 most important things in your life on a piece of paper. And then I walk you through a practice and I say, you went to a doctor or you found a lump in your body and you got a little nervous. I want you to take one of those papers and crumple it up and throw it somewhere. Now you begin to value what's really important in your life. And you're going to understand that being an engineer was not important. Because when you write down those things that are important, you begin to understand what's important in your life. And when you do that, you begin to find how simple your life really is. Your life is so uncomplicated. So if I say, write 5 material things that are important to you, somebody might say a house, my car, this is my favorite dress, you know, this is a very important necklace to me. Those are the 5 material things that are important to me. Where are the 5 places that you love the most? Is it the beach? Is it, you know, what do you love of places where you could go? You know, and what are the 5 most important people in your life? And then when you begin to break it down like that, you begin to understand that you begin to give up all those material things first. In the other side, to me, the only thing that doesn't exist is fear. But everything else is eternal. Everything that I know in this world migrates to the next. Love is the only quality that's eternal. Fear becomes nothing. It dies. It dissolves, evaporates. Very few people experience fear once they're there. Most people experience euphoria. It's a great sense of peace, of love, of oneness, of feeling like they belong, of being accepted and being embraced. That's eternal. And it comes from here. It's not eternal, all the thoughts that come in here. You know, here we got all kinds of things that happen in our head that are predicated by what our needs are in this physical world.
Outside the body, were you Jose? Who you were?
Well, I believe I'm here. Jose is not in this body. that spiritual connection in that painting strand is what allows me to interface with this body. And I understand that this body is a beautiful vessel. It's allowing me to live this life in it. I have a consciousness and awareness that one day again, I'll be saying goodbye to this body. But I have a consciousness that I know I love this body. Before I didn't. I don't live in this body. None of us really do. We live in a stream. And that stream is called God, creation, whatever you want to call it. It exists. Consciousness, the survivability of consciousness, is not that consciousness needs to survive my death, my body. Consciousness survives forever. As a human being in this body, I think, well, will my consciousness survive when my body dies? My consciousness is part of something eternal, something that's everything. So consciousness doesn't think. My brain thinks. Consciousness is. And consciousness is potential. If you look at consciousness as potential, then that's all we have is potential. And everything in this world is full of potential. So a tree, if we chop it down and it gives its life up to us that way, and we use it to burn it so we could create warmth and a fire, then it's serving its purpose, but its consciousness is still exists somewhere else. It's the same place where I exist. All those consciousness thoughts, or everything that is, exists in one place. If you think of the universe as a whole, it exists everywhere at the same time. So I don't look at myself as only being here. I look at myself as being everywhere all the time. And we all are. That's why when we die, we don't die. Before we go, I want to add one thing. There is this Netflix show coming out, an investigative journalist that wanted to study this field because she wanted to see if there was anything real about it. Investigative journalists usually don't express their opinion. They just present the facts of what they discovered. Leslie, when she finished this book, expressed the opinion that I think there's something more here. So getting into it and trying to find out about it actually had an impact on how she believed and how she thought. And I think that people like myself, that I thought all this was just a bunch of hokey-pokiness and ridiculous and crazy. If you would ask me before my experience, I would have no interest in this. But I learned after my experience how vital it is to get this message out. Because it brings a lot of comfort and a lot of peace to people. And they may resist. But at one point in their life, when they might be in a position where things are really difficult or something, they might go back and say, you know what Ila said? She said this. And that's giving me comfort right now. So if you could see that show, it is on Netflix. It starts tomorrow. Well, I don't know when this will air, but it would have already started. Please tune in. And I have a little part in it, but I think it's important that it's called Surviving Death. It was a book written by Leslie Kane. And it's a 6-series docuseries that only doesn't deal with near death. It deals with other subject matter like reincarnation and things like that. So it explores the survivability of consciousness in many different areas from a research perspective, not from, so they looked at it and they explored it in very deep, in a rich way.
Well, we sure gonna watch it. Jose, I want to thank you
so
much for
all the wisdom from your experience and sharing with us that beautiful insights. It was a spiritual pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank both of you for your compassion and your understanding, and I am so glad that you're getting this message out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
תודה לכם שהייתם איתנו, נתראה בפודקאסטים הבאים.